It began in silence, deep beneath layers of rock and compacted earth, in a region thought to have yielded all its secrets long ago. What emerged was not another shard of pottery or a weathered tool, but something infinitely more troubling. Resting in the palm of a gloved hand was an object of such precise geometry that even seasoned archaeologists hesitated to call it ancient. Smooth edges curved into one another with a symmetry that spoke of precision engineering. Microscopic analysis later revealed tolerances within a margin of error that rivaled modern industrial manufacturing. If you want to uncover more stories they can't erase, make sure you stay with me until the end and subscribe to Dust Files so you don't miss what comes next. The dating results defied every established historical timeline. Buried alongside soil layers known to be more than 6,000 years old, the artifact should have been crude, simple, and unmistakably primitive. Instead, its surface was composed of an alloy never before documented in the archaeological record. This was not merely a combination of metals. It was a fusion of elements requiring controlled temperatures and processes unknown to the civilizations we credit with early metallurgy. As researchers examined its core, another anomaly emerged. Embedded deep within was a sealed chamber no wider than a coin, containing traces of crystalline material. Under magnification, the crystal structure revealed an intricate lattice pattern unlike any natural formation. Electrical engineers studying its properties noted that the configuration could, under certain conditions, generate and store small but consistent amounts of energy. The object did not bear any inscriptions, decorative motifs, or cultural markings that could link it to a known people. It was, by every measurable standard, an impossibility. The surrounding excavation site offered no easy explanation. There were no signs of a workshop, no accompanying tools, no remnants of a culture known for complex metallurgy. Instead, the artifact lay among fractured bones of long-extinct animals and primitive stone implements, as though it had fallen out of step with time itself. Geological mapping indicated it had been undisturbed for millennia. Even the erosion on its surface told a story of incredible age. Yet, the sharpness of its features suggested it had resisted the slow decay that ruins most ancient artifacts. Its removal from the site triggered a chain reaction in the academic world. Laboratories across continents competed for access, each conducting their own series of tests. X-ray diffraction, spectroscopic imaging, and isotope analysis only deepened the enigma. No known mining operation in the region could have produced the ore that made up its alloy, and no natural formation explained the crystal structure. It was as though it had been manufactured in conditions far beyond the capabilities of its era, and then hidden away in an age before writing, before kingdoms, before cities. The discovery rippled outward, drawing in specialists from disciplines far removed from archaeology. Metallurgists puzzled over the purity of its base material. Material scientists found themselves unable to replicate the crystal lattice without advanced equipment. Even military historians quietly speculated about its potential applications if scaled, a dangerous notion for something so ancient. The more it was studied, the more it seemed to defy not just the known history of technology, but the trajectory of human development itself. This was not the first time anomalies had surfaced in the archaeological record, but rarely had one been so well preserved, so undeniably real, and so impossible to dismiss as misinterpretation or fraud. The artifact was not an abstract theory or a half-decayed ruin. It was a complete, tangible object, meticulously crafted, yet impossibly ancient. It forced a reconsideration of every assumption about when complex engineering truly began. Its unveiling to the public was equally charged. Initial photographs leaked online before any official statement could be crafted. The images sparked a storm of speculation, with some calling it proof of forgotten civilizations, and others dismissing it as a modern plant. Yet the scientific community, for all its caution, could not ignore the rigor of the data. Peer-reviewed journals cautiously acknowledged its authenticity, while sidestepping the implications. Museums quietly expressed interest in acquiring it, though the excavation team refused to relinquish control. Behind closed doors, debate turned into quiet urgency. If one such object could survive buried for thousands of years, there might be others, perhaps entire caches, waiting to be found. And if this was a fragment of a greater whole, what had the complete device been capable of? While the public fascination centered on speculative theories, the academic pursuit was far more grounded: to locate the origin, the workshop, the blueprint, or at least a second example that might reveal a pattern. For now, the relic stands as a lone messenger from a time that does not fit neatly into our chronologies. It occupies a strange liminal space, ancient yet advanced, simple in shape yet unfathomable in design. Every new test pulls the thread tighter, weaving it deeper into the fabric of a mystery that stretches far beyond its discovery site. The dig team returned the site to a controlled state, preserving the surrounding area for further excavation. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have mapped anomalies beneath the surface, some suggestive of additional structures or deposits. Whether these prove to be related remains to be seen, but the first find has already rewritten the rules of engagement for those seeking to understand the technological capabilities of early humanity. In the annals of archaeological discovery, many artifacts have been hailed as revolutionary, only to fade into obscurity when further research demystified them. This, however, shows no sign of becoming one of those cases. Every attempt to situate it within the known arc of history only sharpens the edges of its impossibility. And in that impossibility lies the beginning of a much larger story, one in which our understanding of the past is not merely incomplete, but fundamentally flawed. Beneath the modern world lies a second, older world, silent, buried, and carved with precision that should not have been possible for its time. In the heart of Turkey's Cappadocia region, a network of stone passageways descends into the earth. Known today as Derinkuyu, it stretches more than 18 stories deep, with ventilation shafts that still function flawlessly after centuries of abandonment. The stone is carved with perfect symmetry, the corridors aligned in a way that allows air to circulate naturally, as though designed by engineers who understood the science of airflow long before such principles were recorded. The official story tells of early societies seeking refuge from invaders, but the sheer scale of Derinkuyu defies simple explanations. Entire populations could live below the surface for months at a time. There were kitchens with blackened ceilings where fires once burned, stables with troughs still carved into the rock, and massive rolling stone doors designed to be sealed from within. Each level connects to others through a labyrinth so complex that even modern explorers rely on maps to navigate it safely. The builders are unknown. The date of its original construction is unknown. And yet it stands, carved into volcanic rock with a precision that feels alien to its supposed era. Half a world away, in the remote waters of Micronesia, the ruins of Madol rise out of the Pacific like the ribs of some ancient giant. Basalt columns, massive, hexagonal, and weighing several tons each, are stacked with such accuracy that they interlock naturally, forming seawalls, canals, and platforms. The city's layout suggests a complex understanding of tidal patterns, as channels are perfectly aligned to flush the waterways clean. No local tradition recalls the quarrying or transport of these stones, and the nearest source of such basalt lies miles across open water. Moving them would have required either an immense workforce or a form of transport entirely absent from historical accounts of the region. The same mystery repeats in South America. In the highlands of Peru, megalithic stone complexes like Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo display walls where each block fits perfectly into the next, so tightly aligned that not even a blade can pass between them. The stones are not uniform. Each one has an irregular shape, yet they fit together like pieces of a puzzle, their joints angled and curved in ways that defy simple chisel work. Some stones bear glassy surfaces, as though their edges were softened or molded before hardening again, a technique no known ancient culture possessed. These sites often rest beneath or alongside later constructions by civilizations we know, suggesting they were inherited rather than built from scratch. What links these distant sites is not just their engineering brilliance, but their silent persistence across time. Their builders left no written records, no surviving blueprints, no clear trace of the tools or methods they used. Instead, their mastery is recorded in the durability of their work. Water still flows through channels, carved thousands of years ago. Walls remain standing despite centuries of earthquakes and erosion. These cities, or what remains of them, were not simply settlements. They were enduring systems, crafted to function across generations. The layouts hint at something more than survival or defense. Derinkuyu's chambers are not random, but organized into zones, areas for food storage, water access, communal living, and even religious or ceremonial spaces. Madol's placement in the lagoon and its network of artificial islets point to a complex social structure, where elites and priests lived apart from the rest of the population. The Peruvian stone complexes often align with astronomical events, as though the cities were also observatories, tracking the movements of the sun and stars with unerring accuracy. The deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that these were not primitive communities gradually feeling their way toward progress. They were sophisticated from the moment we first encountered them in the archaeological record, as if the knowledge required to build them had appeared fully formed, and then, just as suddenly, disappeared. In many cases, later societies occupied the same spaces, but lacked the ability to replicate the construction techniques of their predecessors. The new inhabitants patched and repaired, but never rebuilt in the same style, as though the original methods had been lost to time. Even the erosion tells a story. In some places, the wear patterns suggest these cities were abandoned far earlier than the cultures historians currently associate with them. Flood layers, wind-blown sediment, and overgrowth indicate long stretches of complete desertion before later populations arrived. In Derinkuyu, certain passages appear older and more weathered than the rest, hinting at expansions or repurposing by different groups over thousands of years. There is no single thread tying these cities together geographically, yet the similarities in their construction suggest a shared level of technological understanding. Whether this knowledge was the result of independent innovation or some form of cultural exchange across vast distances remains unproven. What is clear is that this knowledge vanished. Later civilizations, for all their achievements, built differently, less durable, less precise, more easily erased by time. In the modern era, excavation of these sites has advanced with new technology. Ground-penetrating radar reveals structures still buried, networks of tunnels stretching beyond mapped areas. LiDAR scanning has exposed entire districts beneath jungle canopies, their shapes unmistakably artificial. Each discovery pushes the origins further back, hinting at a depth of history for which written records offer no confirmation. The silence of that gap speaks loudly, a reminder that much of what humanity once knew is no longer ours to recall. The forgotten cities beneath our feet are more than ruins. They are the remaining fingerprints of an age whose mastery of construction, logistics, and environmental adaptation exceeds what we have credited to the ancient world. They stand as evidence that the technological arc of humanity is not a straight climb from primitive to advanced, but a jagged line, rising, falling, and in some cases, plummeting into darkness before emerging again. And within those drops, entire chapters of human capability may have been erased, leaving us to wonder not how far we have come, but how far we once fell. Across the ruins of time, stories endure, not as dry lists of events, but as vibrant epics where gods descend in chariots of fire, heroes wield weapons of unimaginable force, and machines built by human hands move with the grace of living beings. These tales, recorded in clay, etched in stone, or preserved in fragile manuscripts, are often labeled as allegory. Yet, woven into their verses are descriptions so specific, so mechanically plausible, that they press against the boundary between myth and memory. In the Sanskrit epics of ancient India, the Mahabharata speaks of vimanas, airborne vehicles, some resembling great flying palaces, others compact and swift like modern aircraft. They are described not as the stuff of dreams, but as functional craft, powered by fuels and mechanical systems, capable of vertical flight and intercontinental travel. Accompanying them are accounts of weapons that could unleash intense heat, scorch entire regions, or blind armies with radiant light. These depictions are presented within the same narrative framework as political disputes, alliances, and battles, suggesting they were treated as part of the historical record rather than as mere fantasy. In the shadow of Mesopotamia's ziggurats, Sumerian and Akkadian tablets speak of the Me, divine decrees or gifts of civilization, which include not only laws and rituals, but also skills in metallurgy, construction, and the creation of complex devices. The Sumerian king lists tell of reigns stretching thousands of years before the Great Flood, ruling from cities whose remains are now buried beneath silt and desert. While scholars often interpret these reigns as symbolic, the technological references embedded in these myths, from precise irrigation systems to elaborate temple mechanisms, align closely with real archaeological finds that show sudden leaps in engineering capability without clear developmental stages. Ancient Greece offers its own catalog of mechanical marvels, some attributed to the gods, others to human inventors working under divine inspiration. The myths of Hephaestus, the godsmith, speak of self-propelled tripods that could move on their own and golden attendants that assisted in his forge. Automata described in such detail that they bear striking resemblance to programmable machines. Historians have uncovered accounts of real-world inventors like Hero of Alexandria, whose steam-powered devices, hydraulic doors, and mechanical theaters blur the line between entertainment and engineering genius. These creations, while remarkable, appear as echoes, smaller, simpler shadows of what the myths suggest once existed. The Romang and Chinese worlds also preserve these strange overlaps between story and mechanism. Records from Han Dynasty China describe flying machines and automated carts that could navigate without human guidance, powered by intricate gear systems. In Rome, there are mentions of siege engines capable of launching projectiles with a precision and force that stunned their adversaries. Machines designed with an understanding of physics centuries ahead of their time. These descriptions are consistent, not only within their own cultures, but across civilizations that, according to the conventional historical timeline, had no direct contact. Patterns begin to emerge when these myths are laid side by side. Flight, automation, energy harnessed in destructive force. These are not isolated motifs. They appear in disconnected geographies, in eras separated by millennia, wrapped in different languages and symbols, yet carrying a shared core. In each case, the knowledge seems to appear suddenly, without a clear lineage of gradual invention. Then, just as suddenly, it vanishes, leaving behind fragments. A half-functioning mechanism, a ruin too advanced for its attributed builders, or a verse in an epic that modern readers call metaphor. When engineers today analyze the specifications embedded in some of these accounts, they find the principles mechanically sound. Descriptions of how certain vimanas maneuver or how Greek automata function align with basic engineering concepts that were only formally rediscovered in recent centuries. This doesn't prove the machines existed as written, but it raises the possibility that the stories could be distorted recollections of real devices, filtered through generations of retelling. The archaeological record offers hints that such distortions are possible. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, stunned modern science with its complex arrangement of gears, designed to predict astronomical positions with extraordinary accuracy. Its craftsmanship was so advanced that it forced historians to rethink the technological ceiling of the ancient Mediterranean. If such a device could vanish from the historical narrative for nearly 2,000 years, could not other, even more sophisticated machines have done the same? There is also the unsettling fact that many myths conserve technical details in contexts where there is no obvious symbolic need. Descriptions of how a flying chariot tilts to bank, or how an automated figure's joints are fitted to allow smooth movement, seem unnecessary for a purely allegorical tale. Yet they persist, copied by scribes, passed from one storyteller to another, as though the precision itself carried weight worth preserving. The disappearance of these machines, if they existed, may not have been gradual. Some accounts imply a sudden loss, a catastrophe, a societal collapse, or a deliberate concealment of knowledge. In each region, the disappearance is followed by a period of simpler, more rudimentary engineering, as though the technology had not evolved, but rather been replaced with something far less sophisticated. The people who inherited these civilizations could marvel at the relics left behind, but they could not recreate them. This intersection of myth and mechanism is not a matter of proving each story literal. It is about tracing the way civilizations encode their memories of technology. Whether those memories are of real machines or symbolic visions, they share a structure. A fascination with harnessing forces greater than human strength, with creating devices that move or fly, with building tools that extend the reach of human will. That structure endures, even when the machines themselves are gone, suggesting that at some point in the distant past, humanity may have known and then forgotten more than it now remembers. In the folds of these myths lies a tantalizing possibility that the machinery of the past, described in verse and legend, was not the invention of poets, but the last echo of an older, greater age of human ingenuity. An age that ended, leaving only its stories behind. The first time divers stumbled upon the Antikythera mechanism in 1901, they believed it was just a lump of corroded bronze pulled from an ancient shipwreck. Only decades later would X-ray imaging reveal the impossible. A complex arrangement of interlocking gears, precisely cut teeth, and a level of craftsmanship that seemed utterly out of place for 2,000 years ago. This wasn't a simple navigational tool. It was, in essence, an ancient analog computer, capable of predicting astronomical positions, eclipses, and even the timing of Olympic Games. Its gear ratios are so precise that engineers today admit they would struggle to reproduce it without computer-guided machinery. The Greeks of that era had no such technology, at least not according to everything we've been taught. And yet, the mechanism exists, mute but defiant, whispering that our timeline of human invention might be incomplete. Thousands of miles away, another enigma waits in the stone heart of Egypt. Granite, the kind used in ancient temples and sarcophagi, is so hard that modern diamond-tipped drills struggle to cut it efficiently. Yet scattered across Giza and other sites are examples of perfectly cylindrical holes, bored deep into granite blocks, some with spiral tool marks that suggest the drill advanced at a speed and precision difficult to achieve even today. The late engineer Christopher Dunn famously analyzed some of these cores and concluded that the feed rate of the drill was too fast for primitive copper tools. This wasn't a matter of simply pounding stone with harder stone. The evidence hinted at techniques lost to time, perhaps involving methods we don't yet understand. In South America, the story repeats itself with different players. At Puma, Punku, part of the Tiwanaku archaeological site in Bolivia, vast stone blocks are cut with such exactness that their edges fit together without mortar, almost like prefabricated puzzle pieces. The stones are andesite and red sandstone, heavy, dense, and resistant to erosion, yet they show precise 90-degree cuts, interior angles, and grooves that seem almost machined. Engineers who have examined them admit that achieving such results with simple chisels and stone hammers would require an almost superhuman level of patience, skill, and standardization. But the mystery deepens when you consider the transport problem. Some blocks at Puma Punku weigh over 100 tons, yet the nearest quarry for certain stones is miles away, across uneven, high-altitude terrain. Conventional explanations rely on ropes, manpower, and sledges, but experimental archaeology has yet to fully replicate such feats under the same environmental conditions. And then there's Lothagam in present-day Kenya, where archaeologists found beads made of obsidian, volcanic glass, so finely drilled that the apertures measure fractions of a millimeter across. These were not ornamental afterthoughts, but uniform, mass-produced pieces crafted by a culture over 5,000 years ago. Modern jewelers using steel drills and rotary tools would find the work tedious. Yet somehow, it was done, and done in quantities large enough to supply entire communities. Each of these discoveries shares a common thread. They challenge the idea that human technology followed a smooth, linear progression from simple tools to complex machinery. Instead, they suggest a past where certain cultures achieved bursts of technical mastery that either disappeared, or hidden, or were forgotten entirely. Skeptics often argue that there is nothing supernatural about these artifacts, and in many cases, they're right. Skilled labor, time, and ingenuity can explain much. But even within those constraints, certain details refuse to conform to the narrative. Why are there no intermediate examples showing the learning curve? Why do some techniques seem so advanced, then vanish completely from the historical record? The Antikythera mechanism's complexity was not seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The precision-drilled granite of Egypt has no clear predecessors or successors. The fine beadwork of Lothagam appears in one window of time, then fades. It's as if pockets of ancient knowledge bloomed in isolation, leaving behind a few durable artifacts before fading into obscurity. And perhaps that's the most haunting part of these tools that shouldn't work. They remind us that history is not a neat, unbroken line. It is a tapestry of lost chapters, sudden innovations, and unexplained silences. Every rediscovered artifact is a page torn from an unknown book, hinting at stories we were never meant to hear in full. The modern effort to understand these tools is ongoing. Researchers use 3D scanning, computer modeling, and high-resolution microscopy to reverse engineer ancient methods. Some have succeeded in recreating certain techniques, proving that with enough skill and patience, what once seemed impossible can be done by hand. Others remain stumped, unable to bridge the gap between what the archaeological record says was available and what the physical evidence demands. We may one day fully understand the Antikythera mechanism, the granite drill cores, the stone puzzles of Puma Punku, and the microscopic beadwork of Lothagam. Or perhaps we'll only ever get fragments, enough to marvel, enough to question, but never enough to know. Until then, these tools sit in museums and collections around the world, silent but insistent, asking us to reconsider what we think we know about human ingenuity, and about the long-shadowed history of our own species. History is rarely a straight, unbroken line of progress. More often, it is a jagged path, rises and collapses, sudden leaps forward followed by unexplained falls into silence. In certain epochs, that silence is deafening. Entire cultures, once teeming with innovation and skill, seem to vanish into a fog of forgetfulness, leaving behind only fragments of their brilliance. The records grow thin, the craftsmanship crude, and the written word stumbles back into simplicity, as if a hand had swept the slate clean. One of the most haunting examples lies in the fall of the Mycenaean civilization. These master builders of ancient Greece engineered massive fortresses, perfected bronze weaponry, and maintained complex trade networks across the Mediterranean. Yet, within a single generation, their palaces were abandoned, their writing system, Linear B, forgotten, and Greece entered a period historians call the Dark Ages. For over 400 years, the art, architecture, and literature of the Mycenaeans were replaced by more primitive forms. The knowledge was not merely misplaced, it was obliterated. No smooth transition, no gradual decline, just a cliff. We see the same pattern in the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization. For centuries, its cities flourished with advanced drainage systems, standardized weights and measures, and intricate urban planning that rivaled anything in the modern world. Then, without clear warning, the meticulous city grids dissolved into disorganization. The sophisticated script of the Indus people, never fully deciphered, stopped appearing altogether. Later settlements show no trace of the old precision, almost as if the new inhabitants had never seen such marvels before. These are not isolated accidents of history. In Mesoamerica, the great city of Teotihuacan once drew tens of thousands to its grand pyramids and sprawling avenues. It was a beacon of astronomical and architectural genius. Then, suddenly, the population scattered, the temples fell silent, and later cultures, including the Aztecs, treated the city as an ancient mystery they had inherited, not built. The chain of knowledge had been broken, and no one could explain why. Even in Egypt, often portrayed as a slow, steady civilization, there are abrupt voids in the timeline. Periods where monumental building projects cease, artistic styles regress, and inscriptions thin out. Entire dynasties seem to dissolve into obscurity, their achievements reduced to whispers in the sand. And when construction resumes, it is not always a continuation, but a reinvention, as if a culture had to rediscover what it once knew. The question is not simply why these collapses happened, but how entire systems of knowledge could vanish so completely. In most cases, skills are passed down. Architects train apprentices, scribes teach pupils, artisans guide their children. Yet, in these historical gaps, it's as if the chain of mentorship snapped everywhere at once. Such total erasure suggests something more than war, famine, or political upheaval. It suggests an active silencing, whether by nature, by man, or by forces still unknown. Some historians attribute these gaps to environmental disasters, droughts, floods, volcanic eruptions that decimated populations and forced survivors into survival mode, where art and science became luxuries. Others blame invasions, where conquering forces destroyed not just buildings, but libraries, archives, and teachers. Yet, even with these explanations, the speed and completeness of the cultural amnesia remain unsettling. In some cases, even the conquerors should have preserved useful knowledge, and yet they did not. There are theories more unsettling still. Whispers in fringe archaeology suggest that some of these silences coincide with astronomical events, sudden climate shifts triggered by cosmic impacts or solar anomalies. Others hint at a more deliberate erasure, where ruling powers sought to reset society entirely, wiping away the old order to impose a new one. In such a scenario, the destruction of records and knowledge would not be an unfortunate byproduct. It would be the goal. Perhaps most disturbing is that the pattern is not confined to the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria's burning is the most famous example, but it is far from the only one. In the medieval period, entire archives were purged during political and religious upheavals. Books deemed heretical vanished overnight, often replaced by state-approved narratives. Each purge left a scar, a silence where the original voices had once spoken. The sudden silences in the archaeological record remind us that history is fragile. Civilizations assume their knowledge will endure simply because it exists, but survival requires more than creation. It requires uninterrupted transmission. Once that chain breaks, even the most advanced society can find itself stumbling in the dark, unaware of what it has lost. What we call progress is not a constant march forward. It is a delicate bridge, suspended across the abyss of forgetfulness. In the past, that bridge has collapsed again and again, and the echoes of its fall are the gaps we now study. The abrupt endings in pottery styles, the halting of monumental building, the disappearance of scripts. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is this: the silence never announces itself. One day, the records are full, trade routes bustling, temples echoing with prayers, scribes carefully etching history into stone. And then, the next day that survives in the record? Nothing. We like to think such total loss could never happen in our age. But as these ancient examples show, the fragility of memory is timeless. The question is not whether societies forget, it is only a matter of when. The world has always been fragile. Civilizations rise on pillars of innovation, trade, and culture. Yet in the shadow of that progress lies a truth most historians admit with reluctance. All it takes is one night, one event, to strip away centuries of achievement. And when that moment comes, there is rarely time to prepare. Ancient chronicles speak of cities swallowed whole, their lights extinguished, not one by one, but in a single merciless stroke. The remains of these tragedies are not just stones and bones, but silent warnings etched in the geological record. Beneath layers of soil and ash, history keeps score. Pompeii is perhaps the most famous tomb of progress. In 79 AD, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius froze a thriving Roman city in its final breath. But the true tragedy was not merely the loss of life. It was the erasure of a cultural node. Pompeii was more than a place to live. It was a hub for art, engineering, and trade. When the ash fell, it buried not only homes and temples, but the unrecorded knowledge carried in the minds of its citizens. An entire microcosm of human expertise vanished, leaving gaps in the technological chain that Rome never fully restored. This pattern repeats across history. In the Pacific, entire coastlines tell stories of sudden obliteration. Geological surveys in the Pacific Northwest reveal layers of sand deep inland, evidence of a massive tsunami centuries ago. Indigenous oral traditions speak of the earth shaking, the sea receding, and a wall of water devouring the land. Whatever settlements stood there, their craft, tools, and intricate ways of life were swept into the ocean in minutes. The knowledge tied to those communities was not simply drowned. It was erased from collective memory, as if it had never been. Far from the sea, disaster came from the skies. Ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica reveal sudden spikes in radioactive isotopes, fingerprints of solar storms so powerful they could have blinded night skies and fried primitive electrical systems had they existed. The most famous of these in recorded history is the Carrington event of 1859, when telegraph wires across the world sparked and caught fire. But earlier, undocumented events may have been even more severe. Imagine a society on the brink of industrialization, experimenting with energy harnessing, only for a single solar flare to knock it back centuries. No records, no surviving blueprints, no second chances. Volcanic winters also played their role as silent executioners. In 536 AD, something, likely a massive volcanic eruption, filled the atmosphere with ash and sulfur, dimming the sun for over a year. Historical accounts describe a ghostly twilight at noon, crops withering in the fields, and famine tightening its grip across continents. Empires buckled, cities emptied. It was not a single cataclysmic explosion, but a slow suffocation of human progress. We cannot measure the inventions lost, because the inventors themselves starved before they could pass them on. Some disasters left marks, not just in soil and ice, but in human behavior. Archaeologists studying abandoned settlements in Mesoamerica found evidence of sudden migration. Entire cities evacuated in what appears to have been a matter of weeks. Climate data points to prolonged drought, collapsing agricultural systems, and civil unrest. In such chaos, the finer arts of engineering, governance, and trade management are the first to disappear. Once survival takes priority, the higher pursuits of the civilization become expendable. Then there are the events so sudden, so final, they border on the unimaginable. Off the coast of Japan, the seabed holds ruins, stone steps, and terraces. that some claim are remnants of an ancient coastal city swallowed by the sea. While debate rages over whether they are natural formations or man-made, the possibility lingers. Perhaps here too, the lights went out in a single night. What unites all these disasters is the chain reaction they trigger. A city may be the visible face of a civilization, but its lifeblood is the network of skills, resources, and ideas flowing within it. Destroy the hub, and the network collapses. In the ancient world, there were no cloud backups, no off-site archives. The library was the scholar. The blueprint was the craftsman. The formula was the alchemist's whispered secret. Lose the person, and you lose the knowledge. It is tempting to think that modern civilization has outgrown this vulnerability. Our data is digital, our cities connected, our archives redundant. But the geological record says otherwise. Earth is not sentimental. A single asteroid, a supervolcano, or a geomagnetic storm could, in theory, wipe away not just infrastructure, but the very means to rebuild it. We might have satellites and servers, but they too can burn, drown, or vanish under ash. Every layer of sediment, every ring of ice, carries the ghost of a night when the lights went out. And each time, humanity emerged again, but not as it was before. Something was always missing, a forgotten technique, a language without speakers, a craft no one could replicate. Progress is not a straight line. It is a fragile thread, and nature has a habit of cutting it when we least expect. Some histories are not merely forgotten, they are deliberately buried. Across the world, there exist places so heavily sealed, so fiercely guarded, that their contents have remained untouched for centuries. This is not the erosion of time, it is the work of human hands, locking away knowledge, tools, and perhaps truths that someone decided the world should never see again. In the southern tip of India lies the Padmanabhasumi Temple, a site of unimaginable wealth and perhaps even greater mysteries. For generations, its vaults remained undisturbed, known only through whispered legends. When 6 of the 7 vaults were finally opened in 2011, they revealed treasures beyond comprehension. Gold coins, ancient jewels, priceless statues, and ceremonial artifacts that had been untouched for centuries. Yet the final vault, known as Vault B, remains closed. Legends claim it is cursed, sealed by ancient mantras that, if broken, could bring catastrophe. Priests and local elders insist that its opening is forbidden, not because of superstition, but because it contains something more dangerous than gold. In South America, deep in the Amazon basin, explorers have found stone chambers carved into hillsides, their entrances deliberately blocked with massive slabs. Some were filled with artifacts of clear cultural significance, pottery, ceremonial masks, intricate tools, yet others contained objects made of metal alloys unknown to local metallurgy at the time. The question is not only why they were hidden, but who they were hidden from. Were these tools meant to be preserved for a future time, or denied to all time? The Incas, like many civilizations, understood that knowledge could be as dangerous as any weapon. Spanish chroniclers wrote of Inca vaults where strange shining discs and machines that made sound without men were kept hidden. These accounts were dismissed as fanciful exaggerations until in the 20th century, fragments of gears, pulleys, and metallurgical samples from sealed sites in Peru began to emerge. None fit the known technological level of the culture, and none were officially acknowledged by the governments that found them. In Europe, there are catacombs beneath certain medieval churches that have been sealed for hundreds of years. While many are simply resting places for the dead, some were blocked intentionally, their entrances bricked up, and records of their existence erased. One such site, under a church in Eastern Europe, was accidentally rediscovered during renovation in the 1980s. The chamber was filled not with bodies, but with crates, each one holding intricate metal and glass objects that looked like a fusion of medieval craftsmanship and modern machinery. Officials removed them quietly, And to this day, no photographs or public records exist. Why were these objects hidden? One explanation is protection, sacred relics shielded from war, theft, or desecration. Another is suppression, the deliberate removal of certain knowledge from the public sphere. The idea is not far-fetched. Throughout history, empires and religious orders have kept technologies and discoveries for themselves, fearing that common access could destabilize society. Gunpowder was once a tightly guarded secret in China. Navigational maps in the age of exploration were hoarded by kingdoms like state treasures. If such measures were taken for maps and powder, why not for something far more advanced? Even in the modern era, there are echoes of this practice. In 2015, workers digging near a temple complex in Cambodia uncovered a stone corridor leading downward. Before archaeologists could examine it, the government sealed the site, citing structural instability. Locals whispered that officials had found a chamber of lights that moved without fire, and inscriptions in a language no one could read. The official stance is that the site is unsafe, but no independent team has been allowed near it since. The fear of what lies inside these sealed spaces might not be rooted in superstition at all. It may be that certain rulers and priesthoods encountered artifacts they did not understand, or understood too well. If the objects inside contradicted their religious doctrine, threatened their political control, or revealed a history different from the one they wanted told, sealing them away would have been the simplest solution. In some cases, it might have been an act of mercy, locking away a weapon, a formula, or a tool capable of harm. There is also the theory of time release, that some of these chambers were never meant to be opened in their own era. Ancient builders could have been working with the belief, or perhaps even the instruction, that certain tools and knowledge would only be revealed when humanity was ready. In this light, every unopened vault and crypt becomes a kind of time capsule, not of the past, but of the future. Yet time does not always honor such intentions. Natural disasters, war, and greed have cracked open some of these seals prematurely. What's revealed often raises more questions than answers. In one example from the early 20th century, miners in the Indus broke into a stone chamber containing a large disk of solid metal, a composition not matching any known ore source in the region. Alongside it were brittle scrolls coated in resin, their language unidentifiable. Within months, both the disk and the scrolls vanished, reportedly purchased by a private collector whose identity was never disclosed. The pattern is disturbingly consistent. A discovery is made, a hint of something extraordinary emerges, and then silence. The story fades from newspapers, photographs disappear, and the site becomes off-limits. In rare cases where the chamber remains open, its contents are often repackaged as ordinary archaeological finds, stripped of anything that might challenge accepted timelines. Perhaps the most haunting element of all is this: the longer something remains sealed, the more it becomes more than just an object. It becomes a symbol, a promise, a threat, a mystery that gnaws at the edges of human curiosity. Every locked vault whispers the same unanswerable question. What was deemed so dangerous, so powerful, that it had to be hidden away for centuries? Until the seals are broken, or perhaps if they ever should be, we are left only with fragments and whispers, and the uneasy possibility that some of humanity's greatest leaps forward have already been made, and then buried to keep us from ever making them again. Even as empires turned to dust and libraries burned to ash, fragments of knowledge refused to die. They clung to the fringes of the world, far from the palaces and capitals that once celebrated them, hidden in places where only the patient and the devoted could reach them. These fragments did not survive by accident. They were guarded, nurtured, and whispered across generations by those who understood their worth. In the stone halls of remote monasteries, monks bent over parchment, painstakingly copying lines from manuscripts so ancient that the origins of their diagrams were already a mystery. In dimly lit scriptoria, with a scent of ink mixed with burning tallow, These quiet scribes traced the shapes of mechanisms whose purpose they could only guess at: gears, pulleys, intricate hydraulic designs that seemed impossibly advanced for their own time. They did not always understand what they were preserving, yet something in their hearts told them this was sacred work. Across continents, indigenous elders carried different fragments. These were not written on fragile parchment, but woven into the fabric of story and song. Around firelight, they spoke of tools that could shape stone as if it were soft clay, of measuring systems aligned perfectly with the stars, of gardens engineered to feed entire nations without exhausting the land. Outsiders often dismissed these tales as legend, but hidden in the rhythm of their words were engineering principles and botanical knowledge now confirmed by modern science. Among the windswept steppes and desert caravans, nomadic blacksmiths and artisans held on to techniques that had no place in written archives. They knew how to forge alloys stronger than the iron of the day, how to temper blades so finely that a seamstress could split a thread with a single stroke. These skills were never committed to paper, for they were considered living secrets, to be learned only through apprenticeship, and only by those who had proven worthy of the craft. Each group became a kind of living archive. They did not see themselves as scholars in the modern sense. Many could not even read the languages of the old empires. But they carried something far more important: continuity. They were the bridge between a world that had ended and one yet to be built. The monasteries of Ireland, for example, became sanctuaries for ancient Greek and Roman texts during Europe's so-called Dark Ages. In their candlelit cells, far from the collapsing cities of the continent, they copied works of mathematics, astronomy, and mechanics, not to advance technology, but to honor the act of preservation itself. Without their silent dedication, entire chapters of human understanding might have been erased. In the highlands of the Andes, Inca stone masons passed on their knowledge through labor rather than language. Their descendants, though stripped of an empire by conquest, retained the ability to fit stones so precisely that not even a blade could pass between them. The Spanish never fully understood how it was done. Even today, engineers struggle to replicate it without modern tools. Here, too, knowledge survived, but only because it was embedded in practice, not parchment. Some of these keepers worked in deliberate secrecy. In Renaissance Italy, a small guild of glassmakers on the island of Murano guarded their methods as if they were guarding life itself. Their recipes for creating crystal-clear glass mirrors and intricate designs were so prized that revealing them to outsiders was punishable by death. The glassmakers knew that the value of their art lay not only in beauty, but in the technological edge it provided to those who understood it. Elsewhere, the guardianship was more spiritual than practical. In Ethiopia, monks safeguarded manuscripts bound in leather, written in Ge'ez, a language older than most kingdoms on earth. These books spoke of astronomy, medicine, and agriculture in ways that blended science and scripture, reflecting a worldview where the two are not separate. For the monks, protecting these volumes was not merely about saving history. It was about preserving the soul of their people. But the survival of this knowledge was rarely guaranteed. Plague, war, and shifting politics threatened to extinguish it at every turn. Libraries were burned to erase heresy. Oral traditions were suppressed under the weight of colonization. Skilled craftsmen were enslaved or scattered, their secrets diluted in the process. That any of it remains is a testament to the stubbornness of human memory. The irony is that these keepers of knowledge often did not know just how precious their cargo was. A monk in the 12th century might copy a diagram of a water-lifting machine without realizing it mirrored devices used in ancient Mesopotamia. A tribal elder might recount a star alignment ritual without knowing that it encoded a calendar accurate enough to predict eclipses. The knowledge survived not because they knew its value in our terms, but because they valued the act of preservation itself. In modern times, archaeologists and historians have stumbled upon these surviving fragments like pieces of a puzzle scattered across continents. A page from a forgotten codex matches a technique still used by a remote craft guild. A myth dismissed as superstition turns out to describe a real geological event or engineering feat. The realization is humbling. Civilizations may rise and fall, but as long as even one person carries a fragment of truth, the chain is never completely broken. Yet there is a fragility to this legacy. Much has been lost forever, and what remains is often incomplete. It is like inheriting a library where most of the pages are missing, and the language is half forgotten. Each surviving piece invites speculation. What machines might have been built if certain manuscripts had survived intact? What diseases might have been cured if ancient medical formulas had been passed down unbroken? This is the paradox of the last keepers of knowledge. They were both protectors and prisoners of their time. They could preserve, but they could not fully advance. They could carry the flame, but not spread it freely. And so the fragments they guarded lay dormant, waiting for an age that could understand them. Today, as modern technology races ahead, we find ourselves returning to these fragments. Engineers study medieval manuscripts for lost architectural techniques. Agronomists analyze indigenous seed preservation methods to combat climate change. Metallurgists attempt to recreate alloys once made in small desert forges. The past, it seems, was not a straight road to the present. It was a scattered network of hidden paths, many of which we are only now rediscovering. And somewhere, perhaps even now, there are still keepers. In a village workshop, a craftsman works metal, in a way taught to him by his grandfather. In a mountain monastery, a scribe copies an ancient text without knowing it contains the blueprint for a machine forgotten by history. These acts may seem small, almost invisible, but they are the final threads in a tapestry woven over millennia. If those threads break, the knowledge they carry will vanish, and the world will never know what it has lost. History has a way of keeping secrets, only to reveal them when the world is ready, or perhaps when it is careless enough to stumble upon them. For centuries, the technologies of vanished civilizations lay buried in ruins, entombed in forgotten texts, or dissolved into legend. Many were dismissed as myths, impossible feats exaggerated by time. And yet, some of these so-called impossibilities have found their way back into human hands. Take Damascus steel. For centuries, it was the wonder of the ancient world. A metal so sharp it could slice a single hair in midair, so strong it could cut through lesser blades without dulling. The secret was guarded fiercely by Middle Eastern swordsmiths until, sometime in the 18th century, it vanished completely. Historians believe the method was gone forever, a casualty of trade disruptions and lost knowledge. But in the late 20th century, metallurgists analyzing surviving Damascus blades discovered their extraordinary properties came from a microstructure of carbon nanotubes and carbide formations, the kind of precision we associate with modern nanotechnology. With this knowledge, experimental blacksmiths began forging blades that once again echoed the deadly beauty of the originals. The rediscovery did not just revive a lost craft. It forced science to admit that ancient smiths were manipulating materials at a level we only recently learned to measure. Another marvel, hidden for almost 2 millennia, lay in the crumbling harbors of the Roman Empire. Roman concrete had defied the ocean for centuries, its structures standing firm where modern concrete would crumble within decades. For generations, engineers admired its durability without understanding it. Only in recent years did scientists uncover the secret. The Romans had used volcanic ash mixed with lime, which allowed the concrete to heal itself when cracks formed. Seawater would seep in, react with the minerals, and strengthen the material over time. The result was a building substance that grew stronger the longer it stood, something our own concrete cannot match. Today, this rediscovery is inspiring a new wave of sustainable construction, proving that sometimes progress means looking backward. Some technologies never had a name in the textbooks, only whispers in folklore. In the highlands of Peru, archaeologists studying ancient agricultural terraces found something peculiar: sophisticated irrigation channels that maintained perfect soil moisture year-round, even in seasons of drought. Locals spoke of an ancestral technique that allowed the earth itself to drink and breathe. Soil scientists eventually confirmed that the terraces were part of a massive, interconnected hydrological system, an ancient engineering feat that managed water flow on a regional scale. These systems had been abandoned after the Spanish conquest, their purpose largely forgotten. Now, they are being revived to combat modern water shortages, proving that the solutions to our future may be buried in our past. Sometimes the rediscoveries are born from accidents. In 1900, sponge divers near the Greek island of Antikythera hauled up a corroded lump of bronze from a shipwreck. At first, it was dismissed as debris. Decades later, X-ray analysis revealed it to be an intricate mechanical device with over 30 bronze gears, a machine capable of predicting eclipses, tracking planetary movements, and calculating the cycles of the ancient Olympic Games. The Antikythera mechanism was, in essence, a 2,000-year-old analog computer. Its rediscovery shattered assumptions about the limits of ancient Greek engineering and hinted at an entire lineage of mechanical knowledge that may have been lost with the fall of classical civilization. The Polynesians provide another example, not through a rediscovered object, but through a revived skill. For generations, their ancestors navigated thousands of miles of open ocean without maps, compasses, or modern instruments. The method, known as wayfinding, relied on an intimate understanding of stars, ocean swells, cloud formations, and bird flight patterns. By the 20th century, colonial suppression and cultural erosion had nearly erased it. Then, in the 1970s, a revival movement began. Elders who still remembered fragments of the technique taught a new generation, culminating in the construction of the voyaging canoe, Hakule. Its successful journeys proved that the ancient navigators' feats were not myth, they were mastery. Not all rediscoveries have been welcomed. In India, ancient texts like the Sushruta Samhita described complex surgical techniques, including skin grafts and cataract removal, practiced more than 2,000 years ago. When these writings resurfaced and were analyzed, they revealed that some medical knowledge had regressed rather than advanced. The same is true for certain textiles, like the legendary Dhaka muslin of Bengal, a fabric so fine it was called woven air. The knowledge of how to grow the exact cotton variety and weave its fibers was lost during colonial disruption. And though modern textile experts have tried to replicate it, the exact magic remains elusive. These rediscoveries remind us that finding the past does not always mean reclaiming it fully. Sometimes, the impact of a rediscovery is cultural rather than technical. The unearthing of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the mid-20th century revealed ancient Hebrew texts predating much of the Old Testament, providing new insights into the beliefs and practices of the time. While not a technology in the conventional sense, these manuscripts reshaped our understanding of the intellectual world in which early civilizations operated. They are a reminder that technology is not only machines and tools, it is also systems of thought. Each rediscovery carries a kind of double shock. First, the amazement that ancient people achieved such feats at all. Second, the realization of how easily such achievements can vanish. It's tempting to think that once something is invented, it will stay with us forever, but history shows otherwise. A change in climate, a collapsed trade route, the death of a single master craftsman, any of these can sever the chain of knowledge. The fact that some of these technologies have reappeared is less a certainty than a stroke of luck. Modern science is accelerating these rediscoveries. With satellite imaging, researchers can identify buried roads, forgotten canals, and ancient city grids invisible from the ground. With chemical analysis, they can reconstruct recipes for lost materials. With experimental archaeology, they can test hypotheses about how ancient machines might have worked. And yet, Despite all our tools, many of these finds still happen by chance. A diver in the wrong place at the right time. A farmer turning up an artifact with his plow. There is a quiet irony in the way these rediscoveries unfold. The ancient technologies that re-emerge are often those we suddenly realize we need. Roman concrete appears just as we face a global crisis in infrastructure durability. Ancient agricultural systems resurface as drought threatens our food security. Sustainable metallurgy and textiles return to the conversation as industry grapples with resource scarcity. It is almost as if history has been holding these answers in reserve, waiting for us to recognize their value. But there is also an unspoken warning woven into each rediscovery. For every Damascus steel or Antikythera mechanism we find, there are countless others that remain hidden or are gone forever. The past is not an open book. It is a half-burned manuscript. The pages that remain can inspire us, guide us, even revolutionize us, but they are only fragments. And fragments alone cannot tell the full story. Still, the rediscoveries that have emerged remind us that our ancestors were not fumbling in the dark. They were problem solvers, innovators, and visionaries who, in their own ways, were as advanced as we are today. When we unearth their work, we are not just learning about them, we are reclaiming parts of ourselves. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the dust of forgotten ruins, or in the vaults of private collections, the next rediscovery is already waiting. When we look back across the sweep of human history, the gaps are as striking as the recorded events. Entire eras appear in the archaeological record like stars scattered across a night sky, points of light separated by vast, unlit spaces. We can see where knowledge once burned brightly, and where it fell into darkness. The pattern is clear. The loss of technology is not rare. It is part of our story. We know this because of what has already surfaced. Damascus steel reappearing after centuries, Roman concrete revealing its self-healing strength, the Antikythera mechanism turning from a lump of corroded bronze into the crown jewel of ancient engineering. Each of these moments feels miraculous, but miracles, by definition, are exceptions. For every rediscovered marvel, there must be countless others still buried, locked away, or reduced to dust too fine to recognize. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Nothing about our current age makes us immune to the same fate. A single disaster, a war, a global collapse, and much of what we know could vanish as quickly as the secrets of the Library of Alexandria. The devices and materials that define our time, microchips, data drives, composite alloys, are no less fragile than parchment, bronze, or carved stone. If history has taught us anything, it is that permanence is an illusion. Some of what remains hidden may be close to the surface, invisible only because no one has yet thought to look in the right place. A forgotten storeroom under a crumbling monastery could hold manuscripts describing machines lost to history. A shipwreck lying undisturbed on the ocean floor could conceal cargo that rewrites our understanding of ancient trade and craftsmanship. A sealed tomb in a forgotten desert could contain tools whose function we no longer even recognize. The possibilities are staggering, not because they are far-fetched, but because they are entirely plausible. And when these things are found, they rarely appear with an explanation. The Antikythera mechanism had no instruction manual. The shards of Roman concrete did not come with a list of ingredients. The agricultural systems of the Andes were not accompanied by diagrams. Each rediscovery begins as a puzzle, missing most of its pieces, and it is left to scientists, historians, and experimentalists to reverse engineer meaning from fragments. This is a slow, painstaking process, often spanning decades, and many puzzles remain unsolved. What makes this both thrilling and tragic is the knowledge that some gaps will never be filled. Wood rots, metal corrodes, cloth disintegrates. Earthquakes, floods, fires, and human hands erase more than they preserve. Civilizations rise and fall, leaving behind ruins that may hint at their brilliance, but cannot fully explain it. The reality is that much of human ingenuity has already been swallowed by time. Yet, even with so much lost, the pieces we do have form a silent chorus, telling us something profound. The story of human progress is not a straight line. It is a cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth. Knowledge emerges, flourishes, disappears, and sometimes, if fortune allows, is found again. Each rediscovery reminds us that our ancestors were not simply primitive people groping their way toward modernity. They were problem solvers who faced their own challenges with tools and methods we might not even understand today. The fragility of knowledge should humble us, but it should also ignite a sense of urgency. Every ruin, every unexplored cave, every half-deciphered manuscript is a thread in a much larger tapestry. Pull on the right one, and a whole chapter of forgotten history could unravel before us. But leave it untouched, and the dust will claim it forever. In the face of this uncertainty, the work of preservation becomes an act of defiance against time. Museums, archives, oral traditions, and even the humble act of writing things down, all are attempts to push back against the erasure that history so casually enforces. And yet, no matter how hard we fight, some things will still slip through our fingers. That is the nature of existence. What remains, then, is the pursuit itself. The hunt for lost knowledge is more than an academic exercise. It is a search for ourselves, for the parts of human capability and imagination that have been scattered across centuries and continents. Each artifact recovered, each technique revived, each mystery solved is a mirror reflecting who we were and who we might be again. But there is another layer to this. The more we find, the more we realize how much we still do not know. Each rediscovery doesn't close a chapter. It opens more. The Antikythera mechanism makes us wonder what other machines might have existed in antiquity. Roman concrete forces us to question how many other materials have been lost. Damascus steel asks whether ancient metallurgy may have reached even greater heights than we've yet seen. The discoveries are not endings. They are doorways. And doorways are dangerous things because they compel us to step through. They tempt us to imagine what lies beyond, and once you imagine, you cannot unimagine. This is why the search continues, and why it always will. Somewhere beneath the dust, beneath the ocean, beneath the ruins in the silence, more fragments of our forgotten genius wait. Perhaps they are in plain sight, mistaken for something ordinary. Perhaps they are locked away, intentionally hidden, just as treasures have been sealed in temples and crypts for millennia. Or perhaps they are gone, erased entirely, leaving only the faintest echo in myth and legend. The ancient world is not finished speaking. Its voice is faint, broken by time, but it is still there, in stone, in metal, in ink, in the very soil beneath our feet. And every so often, when the right hands uncover the right piece at the right moment, that voice grows clear enough for us to hear once again. The question that remains is not whether more will be found. It is how much will be lost before we find it.